Well, welcome, everybody. I'm delighted you could all join us this afternoon. As Ashley said, I serve on the board of directors of St. Michael's Foundation. It seems like forever, but I have to say it's 30 years, and it's been 30 great years at a wonderful institution. I have seen so much and believe so much in what St. Mike's does for the lives of so many people, and have heard incredible stories. And more importantly, the impact of the support from our very determined, some would say fierce donor community is having St. Mike's the ability to revolutionize parts of the healthcare system in Canada, and it carries around the world. This hospital has been a big part of not only my life, but the family's life. And I'm honored to say that it's part of the reason why I've become a co-chair of the fundraising campaign to build a Schroeder Brain-Heart Center. St. Mike's is building state-of-the-art facilities in equipment around the Schroeder Brain-Heart Center for catheterization labs, echocardiography labs, I got it wrong, but I tried, neurointerventional operating rooms, and a space dedicated purely to medical invention. So we're excited that you could all join us this afternoon to meet Dr. Vitor Pereira, a prominent endovascular surgeon who's one of Canada's pioneers in the field of endovascular robotics surgery. Dr. Pereira joined St. Mike's at the beginning of April, and we're thrilled that he's chosen to practice within the Schroeder Brain and Heart Center. You'll hear about his plans to make St. Michael's Hospital a leader in endovascular robotic surgery. I can't say enough about St. Michael's. The team has accomplished so much in various areas, including this Brain Heart Center, but none more profound than the work they're doing to battle the COVID-19 pandemic on all fronts: care, research, and advocating for the disadvantaged. I wanted to take a moment to thank our frontline healthcare workers for their tremendous work, particularly during this third wave, but all the way through in the last 14 months. Now I'd like to introduce Sonia Kanzian, Executive Vice President of Clinical Programs and Chief Nursing and Health Professions, and Bob Howard, former CEO of the hospital, to share a few words before we hear from Dr. Pereira. Sonia?
Great. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We're really excited to have you here to hear from Dr. Vitor Pereira, our newest endovascular surgeon within the Department of Neurosurgery. Before we move to that, though, I wanted to share a little bit about St. Mike's and touch a little more specifically on this past year that Tim alluded to. There's no doubt that COVID-19 changed many aspects of your lives, and it also changed many aspects of our lives here at the hospital. When the pandemic hit, St. Michael's had no option but to move fast, and I'm really proud at the work that we accomplished over the past year. We had our COVID-19 assessment center up and running in less than 2 weeks. We transformed our new Peter Gilligan Tower into space to meet the needs of our COVID-19 patients. And because of that space in the Peter Gilligan Tower, St. Michael's was able to open 42 additional ward beds and nearly 50 additional intensive care beds to meet the care for those most vulnerable members of our community, particularly those experiencing homelessness. The tower has also enabled us to play a major role in taking COVID patients from other centers who've been overwhelmed by the demands of care specific to COVID. In December, we opened our vaccination clinic in the lobby of the Peter Gilligan Tower. And by the end of this week, we will have administered close to 100,000 vaccine doses. It's truly been an amazing experience to watch the teams come together across this hospital. On the research side, our scientists have pivoted to work on more than 100 COVID-related research projects. And through their work, we're making efforts and meaningful contributions to help end this pandemic. Like any crisis, there's many vital lessons that we can learn from the pandemic. It's been a catalyst to reimagining the healthcare experience in Canada. And thanks to the brilliant and relentless minds at St. Mike's, our leadership has recognized that it's the time to tackle what hasn't been working well in patient care and to identify how we can do better. We're looking at the healthcare experience through a whole new lens. We're rethinking how the healthcare experience can provide comfort, connection, and confidence to each Canadian, no matter who they are and where they come from. Put simply, with our learnings and our experience, we're going to reinvent Canada's healthcare experience. Today, we wanted to share with you and show you a little of how St. Michael's is already at the forefront of this thinking. Months before COVID-19 hit, our brain and heart leaders were already reinventing in innovative ways the care experience. Realizing the vision of the Schroeder Brain and Heart Center will quite simply lead to a paradigm-changing model. It'll revolutionize care for our patients at St. Michael's and serve as a resource and an example for Ontario, for Canada, and beyond. So what does the Brain Heart Center do that stands us apart from others? Well, traditionally, specialists like cardiologists and cardiovascular surgeons, neurologists, neurosurgeons, radiologists have often worked in silos, interacting essentially when necessary and on an ad hoc basis to support patient care. Drs. Spears, Murata, and Pereira and Peterson are all joining us today, and they knew that this approach was somewhat outmoded and doesn't really make the most sense for our patients, and quite frankly, really limited our innovation. So brain and heart and vascular diseases are not separate diseases or disorders. They're actually closely interrelated. The most common cause of heart attacks and stroke are related to the same problems of atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries. Ruptured brain aneurysms can cause heart muscle damage, and damaged heart muscles can cause strokes from blood clot formation. Even Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia share a genetic link and an association with heart and blood vessel disease. So these physicians have also recognized that treatments and intervention used to address any one of these health issues can inform future treatments and interventions of other related diagnoses and ultimately support the best outcomes for our patients. So recognizing the importance of this positive impact of this progressive thinking and the vision, our specialists started to work together in a very collaborative way that, despite seeming obvious, is not the current model in our health system. So our cardiac, neuroscience, and radiology teams are sharing systems and best practices for patient care. They're sharing and learning from each other in new ways. Our brain and heart specialists are even working together in a clinic, which is looking at inherited diseases that can impact the brain and the heart with aneurysms and valve problems. With this approach, we're already seeing huge advances in surgical treatments and interventions that are minimally invasive and enable our physicians and surgeons to do what couldn't be done before and ultimately improve and save the lives of our patients. Recognizing the impact of this work, our teams in the Brain and Heart Center have made, we've made the Brain Heart Center the linchpin of our hospital strategic plan's focus on innovative specialized care. The Schroeder Brain Heart Center will allow for groundbreaking work by some of the world's top brain and heart specialists, tackling the toughest neurological and cardiac cases right here at St. Michael's. And we're really excited about the potential that lies ahead.
Thank you very much, Sonia. You can hear me satisfactorily. I just immediately want to just thank all the donors who have given so generously over such a long period of time. I can assure you that your generosity is put to very good use carefully to help us serve not only the people in our neighborhood, but for the province of Ontario, Canada, and now beyond. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Vitor Pereira, our latest recruit, who's an endovascular neurosurgeon. Dr. Pereira trained in Brazil as a neurosurgeon, and he'll be joining Dr. Murata and myself in basically converting what once was open surgical therapies for vascular disease into minimally invasive ones. And now the next chapter is really robotic and eventually remote robotic therapies, so that a country like Canada can have improved access for every individual who suffers from these potentially fatal and very disabling diseases. Dr. Pereira trained as an endovascular neurosurgeon. Following that, he went to Paris. He trained in Paris doing minimally invasive techniques, and then he became the head of a hospital in Geneva, Switzerland, where he was for several years involved in many clinical trials supporting the new therapies. He was recruited to Toronto to the University Health Network, and he spent 5.5 to 6 years there, where he continued on his academic trajectory. And he is the first person to have done 20 procedures fixing brain aneurysms from a separate room where the patient is. And this has made him world famous. The next frontier is to do it off-site from a central operating room. And that is one of his goals in his recruitment to St. Michael's Hospital, which really define us to be a unique offering as we go into the next frontier of medicine. Dr. Pereira is a world leader in education for endovascular procedures, for the development of new endovascular procedures, for the testing of existing and developing devices. And for those who are able to register, he will be one of 3 individuals doing live surgery with the St. Michael's Hospital team. Dr. Murata, myself, Dr. Pereira will lead the team in Paris and in Beijing live in September, really demonstrating the latest techniques for people around the world to learn from and to share the ideas, which is a great honor. And he's one of the highest ranking members in the LINC organization. He's a full professor in the Department of Surgery now, and he's a hell of a guy. And I would just like to say it gives me great pleasure to have welcomed him to our division and to have him speak to you tonight to inspire you for the next frontier of endovascular neurosurgery. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Pereira.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you all for being here. It's my great pleasure to be sharing our projects and plans and to talk about the future of stroke treatment. This is the topic that we want to bring today. I'm very happy to have joined St. Mike's, and I admire the team here, and it's a great vibe working here, and also have the support from the administration and the foundation the way I've seen here. Endovascular neurosurgery is a specialty that treats neurovascular diseases. Stroke, brain aneurysms, arteriovenous malformations, and venous diseases are the main ones. Today, we will talk about stroke specifically, which is a very impactful disease. Approximately 800,000 new cases every year with 140,000 deaths, and it's the leading cause of disability. And a stroke is actually an obstruction or an occlusion of a brain vessel by a clot that produces progressively brain damage. And until the 90s, there was no treatment for stroke at all. Just to give you an example, the biggest leaders of the last century, they all died from recurrent stroke without being able to receive any treatment that was inexistent at most of the last century. In the 90s, the treatment of stroke started to be done with a drug that was infused to dissolve the clot, but could only treat small clots and patients that were not that severe. In the 2000s, we started infusing the drug in situ by using minimally invasive techniques. And in 2008, we started developing the techniques that we use now to actually remove mechanically the clots and open the vessels. And these procedures are done in an angio operating room, which is a surgical room that actually has an equipment of X-ray to guide us through the procedure. So we go from the groin, as this video is showing, and we navigate a microcatheter through the body until the cervical, into the neck. And from the neck, we use a smaller catheters to navigate until the brain vessels to actually remove the clot. You can see here an illustration of the clot, a device that's called stent retriever that is expanded and the clot that is being removed. This is one of the most powerful treatments in medicine. Just to give you an example, antibiotics for pneumonia, for example, we need 18 treatments to actually save one life. Antihypertensive medication to control blood pressure, we need 100 of them to actually prevent one heart attack. And if we speak about stroke, we actually need 3 treatments of stroke to actually save one patient. We've done a lot on stroke treatment trials and clinical work, as well as imaging research. And we are happy to now continue developing our research on stroke treatment on other way. So when we have a patient with stroke, usually the symptoms are summarized in this sentence, in this word: fast, face, arm weakness, and speech difficulty. And here there's a video that illustrates actually a patient with
now he's been wanting to put garlic chives in everything.
Well, not everything.
Dad, the side of your face is dripping. Mom?
It's probably nothing.
Dad, are you okay?
You're slurring. Why are you slurring? Raise your arms up in the air for me.
Dad, are you okay?
Gracie, call 911.
I said,
Honey? Tim! Tim, look at me, Gracie. Tell them to hurry. Tim, look at me, Tim. I don't know. I think he's having a stroke. I think my dad is having a stroke. Tim, what's going on, baby? My husband. He's cold. Are you cold?
So once the patient have a stroke, the next step after calling 111, this patient is transported to a hospital that can actually assess the patient. And if the hospital can perform the procedure just showed you, the clot removal, then the patient will recover and the patient will improve. And today with that treatment, we can improve most of the patients if the patients arrive on time. And time for stroke is everything. Time is brain. Every minute, 2 million brain cells die if the vessel is occluded in a patient with a stroke. And a pea size of brain dies every 12 minutes if the treatment is delayed. So more time, the pea size becomes an apple size and the stroke becomes so big that we cannot do anything. This is why time is so critical when we are speaking about stroke treatment. And in a country like Canada, with the vast geography, we have very few hospitals that can perform endovascular treatment of stroke. And if a patient has a stroke in a location that has to be transported, the transportation time will actually influence on the results of the stroke treatment. And some places here in Ontario, in Canada, will take more than 5 hours to be transported to a center performing stroke. And if this patient is even further away requiring aerial transportation, the time can be even impeditive of any type of treatment. So this is the map of Ontario. And in green here are the areas that actually have access to stroke care, unfortunately. And this is not only a problem in Canada. This is the map of US. Only 20% of the American population has access to stroke treatment in a timely fashion. So this is a geographical and a distance problem that we have to solve globally. How we can improve access to acute care of stroke, particularly in geographical vast countries like Canada, US, and many other countries. Our approach is to connect the dots. And instead of actually bringing the patient to the hospitals, we plan to actually install robotic arms and actually be performing the surgeries in the hospital, in the remote location, instead of transporting the patient and saving all that transportation time and the brain that would be actually damaged and get the patients back to their normal life close to their community. And I did speak about robotic neurointervention. Yes, I did speak. And we all, as Julian said, we are already doing robotic neurointervention, robotic brain surgery. And the robots that perform brain surgeries look like this. It's actually, this is a picture of our robotic technologist and program manager, Nicole Cancelleri, in front of a robot that actually is controlled by a remote console. This is the setup, and this is actually the robot in a procedure, in one of our procedures. And in the corner here, you can see the cockpit that can be in different areas of the hospital, in which we can control and manipulate the robotic arm using this screen to actually visually perform the procedure using the control of that touch screen and of these joysticks. And we were the first site and to perform robotic assisted neurointervention. We now have the largest neurointerventional experience in the world. And we are expanding this to perform more than 40 cases this year here at St. Michael's Hospital. And the concept that we have to continue our work with robotics here is to actually have the hub that is a concept room that we call the ORX, plus our robotic simulation lab and our robotic lab that is called Rages Lab, where we perform all the experiments and we test the prototypes to actually in the future apply in the patients like we did with the remote treatment for brain aneurysms. And the ORX, we have the concept that this will be the operating room of the future, where we will combine robotics, artificial intelligence in the projects that we are conducting and starting now. And in the future, be the remote interventions hub to actually control those robots in those remote sites. And with this robotic simulation lab and our lab at the Likashen Technology Institute, to actually bring the remote reality, the remote plan to reality. And the strategy here is to have a room that we will integrate all the simulation, the planning, and the execution in place, develop, and then implement in our community. And this is an idea of the concept that we want to have in the ORX and to be the hub of this remote robotic intervention. And the plan is to remote develop and implement and start performing experiments initially in short distances and testing the connections, testing the telepresence systems to actually control and communicate with the bedside operators in the remote sites, and then extend to further distance to centers that will be more distant. And then when we will be ready, start the first clinical sites to actually deploy the stroke treatment in the areas with lowest access that are actually not even able to offer any kind of treatment for patients that present with stroke currently. And inside the BRAIN&HEART Institute, we want to expand the concept to the cardiac diseases and work together to actually deliver the care remotely to these communities on the acute disease, treating cardiac and brain acute diseases, and also extend to rehabilitation and other areas that we can serve those patients in their communities. And the idea of having the center that will deliver the care is, in our opinion, transformational, and it will assure an equitable access to acute care. And we plan to have literally the word in our hands when we have the actual plan executed of creating the BRAIN&HEART Remote Robotic Intervention Center. And this is a concept that can be expanded even globally to areas of treatment at all for diseases that are actually treatable everywhere, Africa, South America, some countries in Asia. We are certainly steps away from that, years away from that, but I'm sure that starting locally with stroke and heart disease, we will be able to get there in the future. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you. So I'll open it up to everybody for questions.
Ashley, maybe I can ask a first question here on timing. Doctor, what do you anticipate the timing would be for the local first procedure and then the more distant procedure? What is anticipated?
In the hospital, we are already performing surgeries from different rooms. So intra-facility, we are already performing different levels of remote procedures. In different hospitals, if our concept and our plan is successful, I think in short distance, at the beginning of next year, we will be able to be performing, hopefully, the first procedures. And by the end of next year, or in 2 or 3 years, we will be able to be remotely in sites that are 200+ kilometers away from us.
Wonderful.
Dr. Pereira, what do you need at the other end in order to, safely execute remote robotic surgery?
Yeah, on the other end, on the remote site, we need a robotic arm that is connected through a fast connection and reliable connection to our control system. We need a team that locally can operate the robot, and we need also a telepresence system that I can remotely have a visual control of the patient, of the room, and I have access to their equipment on the imaging side to actually be able to control what's the procedure, and also control be actually present even if remotely inside the room. So there is a lot of development to do. The telepresence is one of the developments, the tests of the connections, what kind of connection, we have images, we have signals to transfer, we have signals to receive. There is a lot of research happening in the background to make actually this happening. And we are dealing with a disease that the time is so critical that actually if we are able to succeed, or when we will be able to succeed, it will actually be transformational. 5 hours in a stroke patient is everything. It's the difference of a life and death. So just to be like black and white, and we will be able to expand a treatment to 80% of the population that now it's not able to have access to, just because of the geographical distance.
Maybe just picking and following up on Mike's question, and I'm just thinking about your map and Northwestern Ontario, Thunder Bay as an example. Now, what is the cost on their end of installing the equipment that they need in order to facilitate what you can do from here?
Yeah, they need a room, an angiographic operating room that most of the hospitals will have that. And what is very expensive on this whole treatment is the personnel. You need 4 or 5 neurosurgeons, 4 or 5 cardiac surgeons to be there, dedicated to offer 24/7 service. And this you cannot have it everywhere. And the robot itself and the connection tools, it's not expensive at all. So actually, whenever we have the technology, if you compare the complexity, for example, that the Sun Mics had to do to have a service like the one we have, it's minimum to implement a treatment like that in Thunder Bay, for example. For Thunder Bay would be the cost of the robot and training of a team and workflow organization. That's it.
And what is the cost of a robot these days?
This generation is about $800,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and there will be a next generation dedicated to stroke that will be probably $1.5 million.
Okay. Thank you very much.
In terms of the timeline, I mean, the vision, for example, once we get operating room X up and running, which is largely the vision to be the operating hub that telescopes out to all of the pavilions in its full expression. But in the short term, operating room X will be the robotic hub. And by the end of the year, depending on when ORX is up and running, we would like to do a case between floors. So be on the 5th floor in our operating room and do a case on the 3rd floor as a local proof of principle. And it's contingent on getting operating room X up and running. Then the principles are that you are having quaternary level physicians in the hub, which is an operating room X, and you might have people in the pavilions eventually that their clinical skill is getting access into the groin. So they just need to get into the vascular system, which is much more palatable to the average physician, and after which the robot would take over. So the hyper-specialization really resides in operating room X, with slightly less expertise and diminishing expertise at the satellite sites, just getting into the vascular system, and then we take over, just like you control a drone, but you need to get the drone up in the air. So in terms of timing, we would like to get operating room X up and running before Christmas, maybe do one between the 5th floor and the 3rd floor, and then we'd like to partner with our sister hospital, which makes sense, and we have to have the connectivity so that we have real-time motion, and maybe do one at St. Joe's in 2022.
One of the things that perhaps most people don't know is how few neurosurgical centers there are in the province. And the ones that exist, and maybe Julian can speak to that, or Vitor, but But, we have a very big country with long distances. So this time is brain issue is pretty important in terms of where you live and getting to a place that can actually help you. We have, I think, fewer neurosurgical centers in this province than almost anything else. I mean, you guys are pretty focused and don't exist in large parts of the province. Maybe you could speak to that, Julie, just in terms of the need for this distance care.
Yeah. So for context, the central agency that places critically ill patients is called Criticall. If you have a critically ill patient from around the province, you call the central agency and they get placed. Neurosurgery in the province of Ontario in 2020 takes between 15 and 16,000 phone calls. The next busiest specialty would be trauma. They would probably be in the 1,000 range. So the hyper-specialization and, more importantly, the very, very steep centralization of care is exactly what those numbers represent, that there's only 2 or 3 places, and province-wide it's probably up to 6, that can manage these type of patients. So access to care and justice to healthcare, universal access, is really highlighted in those numbers. And much of what we do, and they say 60% is emergency care, which means it's time sensitive. So the public health impact of growing access by virtue of these type of programs is very substantial. And I think those numbers really bear out why it is such an impactful and worthwhile endeavor. The same on the cardiac side, and I lean on my cardiac colleagues to explain that, but there's a little less centralization, but there's still the principles are the same. And certainly for the time-sensitive procedures, the same applies. And it's a much more prevalent disease. So the public health impact of time to treatment for those people that are in more remote areas is ever so much profound as well. So I think this is a very worthwhile endeavor. I think the world will increasingly be relying on this, and you're going to have hyper-specialization access for patients who are not in metropolitan areas, and they will get their time-sensitive procedures once the proper pavilions are set up.
Toronto's a big city, and if something goes on in Mississauga and there's an emergency out there, can we be helpful in the robotic side out there as well, or do they have the facilities out there to do certain of these things? And what is the expertise of the doctors you need in the distant operating room? If they only have to find the vessel in the groin, they need far less expertise than you people. And is that in these 6 areas? Is that already there? 6 locations.
Yeah, in a city like Mississauga, they have Trillium Hospital that can offer some treatment. They can offer acute treatment for stroke, acute treatment for aneurysms. When they have a case that it's beyond their expertise, they send to us here. But for example, in Barrie, they have to send the patients to us. Peterborough, Sudbury, those centers send all the patients, 100% of the patients that need endovascular neurosurgical care here to one of the sites in Toronto. And you need a neurosurgeon, a neurologist, or a neuroradiologist that did a specific training on endovascular procedures, which is this kind of procedure that I illustrated in the video, going through the vessels to actually reach the brain. And this can take around 2 years of fellowship training after your residence training. This is the amount of special training that you need to become an endovascular neurosurgeon.
Yeah, but you need that where you are, doctor, but do they need that out?
No.
On the other side, on the other side, we are willing to develop a system that we have a doctor there that can only find the femoral puncture, that we can remotely do most of the procedure. So we don't actually have a need to actually have too much training on the remote side. So the idea, the plan is to have a doctor that can get access, and then we remotely take over and do the rest of the procedure.
Yeah, because it seems to me in a place like Barrie or Mississauga, you may have, time is of the essence. So you may put them in a hospital out there and deal with them remotely in location.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, we will see probably at the beginning, it makes sense with the sites that have low access. And then we will see how much time is actually worth investing on a remote site and not transferring these patients to the specialized centers. I agree with you. This is an answer that we don't have yet, but it's certainly something we will evaluate. What will be the effective time, transfer time to actually be a candidate for a remote site? This is one of our research questions as well.
Thank you.
Did you get any kind of support from the Ministry of Health for this project?
No, we don't have any support yet. We've been applying for grants, and we have a number of grants being reviewed to evaluate the remoteness of the robotics in different sites. We have a number of partnerships, including with the foundation, to support this project. And one of our grants is actually to work with the government on identifying the areas of least access to acute care, cardio or neuro, and make a plan with the Ministry of Health of implementation of remote sites. But this is on our, if we receive the grant, this is one of the steps that we will be doing to implement, to make a plan of implementation across Ontario.
Thank you.
Gustavo, did you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, perhaps my question is more, is for Victor and for Julian, more like a clarification. And I'm a stroke doc, so a stroke neurologist, as well as Dr. Safar, my colleague, who is part of that, and we are part of the Heart and Brain initiative. So perhaps you can elaborate a little bit more about, what we can offer, and perhaps exporting technology. So essentially is, if we have the robotics here, we have a stroke neurologist, experts, in endovascular neurosurgical treatment for, starting and solving that problem, and at the same time, potential complications. So can we evaluate essentially or offer an integrated solution that can be exported to other places, could be other countries, could be, other areas that even, you mentioned the example of Mississauga, but, yesterday we transferred a patient from Mississauga to here. Julian was kind enough to accept that patient, for something very simple. So can you elaborate about the integration? What can we offer in terms of integrated solutions and exporting, technology?
Well, to be honest with you, Gustavo, I'm not 100% sure exactly what you mean. I think if you're talking about systems and exporting systems for more than just acute interventional stroke, there are great opportunities for expansion of the robotic remote indications, largely technologically driven. This, we are still in the proof of principle that we have to travel across distance, which we haven't done yet. But as the technology continues to grow, there's no reason why you can't expand it into an integrated program remotely offered, if that's what you're getting at, which changes the complexion of medicine even more profoundly. The increased complexity relies on the increased experience, which will be very centrally located in a quaternary center like St. Michael's Hospital. But like you say, the patient that we accepted yesterday was not a complex patient, but by virtue of a variety of reasons, they ended up here. And where healthcare policy basically takes us in terms of the intensity of local treatments and the benefits of local treatments will be a little bit unclear, but this will be a proof of principle that's expandable to a variety of things. And we fully expect it to do so over the next few years. What we need, we really need to overcome the 5G connectivity, the real-time responsiveness, and depending on how that goes, there won't be too many things where you'll need even better connectivity from these acute stroke care treatments and these acute aneurysm treatments. But the programs will be exportable in a more broad sense with certainty.
The question was more about, that we usually have the expertise and manpower. Somebody asked about what other resources or human resources we need. So essentially, just to, share that, you can count also on stroke neurologists that are not available, even, province and Canada-wide, especially in other locations. So that was one of the points that
I understand. In a very practical way, if you're away from St. Mike's and you can puncture a groin safely, you're hired.
Mike's going to apply for that job. Did you want to?
I'll need a little help.
I just want to comment that this is a visionary project. So just for your reference, we are the only site in North America performing endovascular neurosurgery robotically. We are part of a study with 6 other sites worldwide, and all the research involving remote, it's not done anywhere. So this is why we, was very helpful to have St. Mike's with this vision of integrating brain-heart and also having this activity as one of the pillars, because all the support that we need to execute, we have here. And all the stakeholders in this call are on the medical side, are actually working together to think and how in the best way that we can offer. And 4 years ago, when we started working with robotics, people said, it will never happen. You will never go into the brain with a robot. It will never happen. And it did. And we will do a remote stroke treatment, and hopefully sooner than we expect. And thanks to all the work that this whole team is being doing and will be doing in the upcoming months. When this will be implemented, certainly will be life-changing to many patients. And that's our main motivation, that we actually, this brings us from the field, receiving those patients from other hospitals and other cities, and sometimes being unable to do anything is kind of frustrating. And we want to end that. We want to actually offer equitable access to acute care to everybody as much as we can.
Thank you.
And it's interesting because COVID, in a sense, paradoxically heightens the importance of this in a sense. Because now you don't have to have transport of potentially ill patients with COVID and others because they get strokes. If this was in full flight, you could keep your COVID stroke patients away from other centers, keep them safe in isolation. They could get their stroke treatment with no transport. Imagine the reduction in exposures in that endeavor. So it is interesting. It's just a shame we're not quite there yet.
So that's a very good point, Julian. And if we think about COVID, with the robot, we can minimize the number of healthcare professionals that actually interact directly with the patient. And we can even decrease the contamination of healthcare professionals in emergency procedures that we know is the moment that we are mostly exposed because we are running against time and trying to do the procedure as quick as we can. So very good point, Julian.
Over to you to Mike.
Okay. Well, Dr. Pereira, first of all, welcome to the St. Mike's family. And on behalf of everybody, if I could at least remotely have a round of applause for Dr. Pereira. My name is Mike Norris. For those of you who don't know me, I haven't been around as long as Tim, but I think I am approaching my second decade with volunteering and donating at St. Mike's. And I am co-chairing the campaign here for the Schroeder Brain-HEART Center, which has been a real privilege. It's opportunities like this that just reinforce why, I get so excited about, first of all, St. Mike's and what's going on. Having the privilege of knowing Dr. Spears and Dr. Murata, and to now meet Dr. Pereira, who, is at least the third world-class brain surgeon, we have at St. Mike's. It's just unbelievable to me. And as an engineer, and as a business person, and I see what you are working on to change the future. Like, this isn't incremental, this is game changing, not only for St. Mike's in Ontario, but as we heard from various questions, for the world. And certainly as a Torontonian and a St. Mike's donor and board member, I get great pride in our ability to attract and build on world-class people who are going to change medicine as we know it today. I'm particularly inspired by what the BRAIN&HEART is trying to do, which is to learn be the best at both and on a collaborative basis. And I would say that's a word that a lot of hospitals don't use very often amongst themselves. But my experience over almost 20 years is that this is a center. First of all, it's a center full of world-class scientists and docs, but it's also one that it collaborates in an extraordinary way, and therefore it's exponential what we can accomplish at St. Mike's. And I'm so proud of what they're doing and what they are going to do. As you probably have learned, the BRAIN&HEART emphasis is a center of excellence for St. Mike's. And I think Julian once told me that we do more neurosurgeries at St. Mike's than any other hospital in the country. He will correct me, I'm sure, if I'm wrong, but and I think it's almost by a factor. So it is, and thank you for joining us today to hear about the future. I want to give you a brief update and hopefully have you consider support for this initiative. This will change medicine. It will save lives in a much more economical way for medicine, and will have a global impact. It is a game changer, and that to me as a donor is what gets us excited. We have been and continue to be supporters and not only as volunteers but as donors to this campaign. To give you a sense, this campaign, and you got a picture of one of the cath labs we've already built. The campaign is to raise $42 million, and we're over 80% of the way there. This new addition will need funding, and I'm hoping that if you were inspired today by what you heard, if you think Toronto's better and care in Ontario is better because of people like Dr. Pereira, we would really encourage you to reach out to the foundation. We'd love to get you involved, and we'd love to get this campaign 100% done from the 80% it is right now. So thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you. And again, Dr. Pereira, welcome to the St. Mike's family.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, everybody.